Hello and welcome back to the Chargers Check-In. My name is Cecilia, and today we're going to go over all of the new coaching hires that the Chargers have now officially announced. I think there's a lot of positive takeaways from this. I'm excited to go through it all. Please like and subscribe if you like what you see today. I really appreciate all of you who do that, and I appreciate my members. And members of the channel will be getting a couple new videos soon. We're going to go over the best linebackers in the draft, and we're going to be looking at Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft 2.0, which I thought was really interesting. And I thought he had the Chargers taking a really interesting player at 22. So the Chargers officially announced 8 new coaches, and the first one I want to talk about is Butch Barry. He is going to be the offensive line coach. I think this is a really solid hire. I think, even without the Mike McDaniel connection, this is someone I would have pretty high on the list of priorities. Regardless of if Mike McDaniel were there, but obviously, him having coached with the Dolphins and having worked with Mike McDaniel before is a great connection there, and he has always gotten his unit to kind of overperform the resources put into them. The Dolphins haven't spent much on their offensive line. They've spent so much on skill positions and on defensive players that they just haven't invested in it, and they have still been a functional offensive line pretty continuously, even through personnel changes and, injuries. I think Butch Barry has done a really good job. I think there's something to be said about scheme familiarity and getting someone who can transition, the offensive linemen who stay from the last regime to the new one. I think you have your 2 tackles you want to transition, potentially Zion. I think that's still up in the air. He might be able to go to another team and make a lot of money. So I don't think the Chargers want to overpay him, but if he does stay, you want someone who can transition them to a new scheme, as well as bring in anyone who they might draft. So I like this hire. I think it's, a really good thing. And I kind of trust Mike McDaniel on this one because it worked in Miami, where they don't tend to invest much in the offensive line. So the next coach that they announced is Julian Campeni for the assistant defensive line coach. Now, he joins Mike Elston to coach the offensive line. Mike Elston is staying, apparently, which I think is a really big deal. Mike Elston has been a huge asset for this team. Campeni comes in from Rutgers, where he specialized on defensive ends. So I wonder if this is an indication that Elston, wanted a different perspective for that group, or that O'Leary wanted to focus on interior guys, with Jamari Caldwell, Justin Aboigbe. So that could be a possibility. It also could indicate that, they're bringing in more talent there, so they want more coaches in that room. And in terms of who Campeni is, something he always talks about is the importance of kind of matching the energy of the defensive coordinator. And, at Rutgers, they had Zach Sparber, who was this really, really intense guy. Like, he wasn't just energetic and excitable. He was he reminded me of Ben Herbert at the podium, where he just had the intense eyes and was speaking with such force and conviction. And Campeni would be trying to embody that. So you got to believe that he is going to try to embody the really high energy, fast paced kind of personality of Chris O'Leary, and I think that's a really good thing. I'm not sure what he brings to the table in terms of technical knowledge. That's just kind of the thing that only people around him can know. But we know he brings some fire and excitement, and he seems to be very level-headed. So I think that's a good thing in a position room where we're probably going to see some young talent added. Next, Robert Everett is announced as the offensive assistant. His background is kind of in analytics, like opponent breakdowns and scouting reports. He was with McDaniel in Miami, so he's another carryover there. And before that, he was a senior offensive analyst with Wisconsin. And I know that Wisconsin, while he was there, was kind of trying to shift to more of an analytics approach to things. So that's kind of the philosophy behind bringing him in, as far as I can tell. The next one is more interesting. Adam Gase. He is being brought in as a passing game specialist, not a passing game coordinator like we thought. It looks like right now there isn't a passing game coordinator or a run game coordinator, so we could see more people added to this coaching staff. And this is a more minor role than we foresaw for Adam Gase, who has been a consultant for different teams and different, kind of analytics-focused organizations. So I think kind of a theme in some of these guys they're bringing in is, the guys outside they're bringing in is, what is their understanding of analytics and where the game is going and how we can move forward. Like I said, I don't think anyone associates Adam Gase with innovation, but he is someone you associate very, very in tune with what analytics are saying. And I think that's a really positive thing for Harbaugh, especially. So I'm much happier with that than I am with him as a passing game coordinator. It remains to be seen if there will be a passing game coordinator or if Mike McDaniel feels that he doesn't need that, since, coordinating an offense and being a head coach, that is so much that when you are just an offensive coordinator, I don't know, maybe maybe that extra time makes him feel like he doesn't need all that. So I think that's interesting, and I feel a little better about that than I did before. Next, we have Chandler Henley being hired as a tight ends coach. He was a senior offensive assistant coach with the Dolphins for the last 2 years, so he has that Mike McDaniel familiarity. Before that, he was a quarterbacks coach. Before that, an offensive line coach, I believe, with the Falcons. Then he had a few years as a quality control guy with the Titans, so a pretty standard coaching, start with quality control, move around a bit, different positions, getting to know people, getting to know things. And he had a series of presentations back in 2024 on the benefits of a wide zone scheme that I found were really interesting. You can actually find them on YouTube, and it gives you some insight into, how he sees the scheme, and also, what might appeal to Mike McDaniel about him. And this is someone you could see as a Mike McDaniel coaching tree guy in a few years. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. It's always good to have people who feel like they're on the rise in that way. He's a younger coach. So I like this hire. And obviously only people in the building really know what he has to offer. Like I said, like in a technical sense, that's kind of the case with almost all of these coaches. But, I think it's something we can feel good about. One that I feel really good about is Denzel Martin, who was hired as the outside linebackers coach. He has been with the Steelers for 10 years, so for the last 6 years, he was with the outside linebackers. He himself was a linebacker at Mizzou. He got a few other interviews. I know the Cowboys were really interested in him. I think a couple other teams were as well for that position. I think he is viewed around the league as someone who can really unlock this position, and I think that's a really good thing. His position group with Pittsburgh has always been really good, and I think, not only has he coached some of the best outside linebackers and edge rushers that we've seen, but also, I want someone to come in and unlock Deion Henley and elevate Troy Dye. And, maybe if we add another body into that room, I think it could be a really good thing to have a new perspective on that. And I'll talk a little bit more about linebackers because they also hired a linebackers coach, and that is Sean Spence. So he was a linebackers coach at Western Michigan in 2024, and then in 2025, he was there as an edge rushers coach. So now he is following Chris O'Leary to the Chargers. So this is a Chris O'Leary connection, and he coached Nadeem Tucker to a remarkable year. As much as we want to give defensive coordinators credit for putting guys in a position to win, in terms of college players, I always think the position coach should get a lot of credit because it's not just about the position to win. It's also about technical development. A lot of the time, high school players aren't doing a lot of technical stuff, especially at the edge rusher position. They're just kind of doing inside, outside, and, a swipe and that's it. Or they're doing a bull rush and that's kind of all they have. And then at the college level, you really need coaches who can elevate them technically. And so this is someone I think you can be pretty confident in his ability to do that. He also played for the Steelers for 7 seasons. And the interesting thing about that, there was a brief overlap with Bud Dupree's time there. And so he was briefly Bud Dupree's teammate. I think that's pretty interesting. He's not going to be Bud Dupree's coach because Bud Dupree's probably going to get cut. But, I just think that's fun. And then the last coach they announced was Max McCaffrey, the running backs coach. So he is the brother of Christian McCaffrey and Luke McCaffrey, who is a wide receiver. This guy was an offensive assistant with the Dolphins for a few years. Obviously, the Dolphins have been very successful with pretty much every running back that comes through their system, which is promising. This is another younger coach that could eventually be seen as a part of the Mike McDaniel coaching tree. So he was actually an offensive coordinator at one point at the University of Northern Colorado, I think for 2 years. And, I think that's important. You get someone who is, schematically in tune with what's going on, understands why Mike McDaniel wants to do what he wants to do. And I think that allows for a synergy. And like I said, that coaching tree thing, let's get as many coaches as we possibly can in the building who could be offensive coordinators. So The other, point I wanted to make about that is I think about how the Rams just hired Nate Scheelhaus to be their offensive coordinator. And this was a guy getting head coaching looks, and he's the young up-and-comer. But the Rams have so many of those that even when some of them are poached, they're still good. They still have somebody that they can elevate. So it's always good to have multiple branches in the same building. The Chargers are a team with a lot of head coaches in the building, a lot of coordinators in the building. And I think that's one of my main takeaways. I look at the fact that Sanjay Lal and Shane Day are seemingly staying on, so the receivers and Justin Herbert get to have some continuity. Justin loves Shane Day. We know this. Shane Day is also connected to Mike McDaniel, so that seems like a great fit. It just makes sense. If you can have continuity, it's a good thing to have it. And I think the young receivers have progressed pretty well. Sanjay Lal is very liked and respected in the building. It seems like it's a good thing to have continuity, especially for a room with so many young players. You have first and second year players, and then you have Keenan, and we don't know if Keenan's coming back, but even if he does, that's really the only real veteran presence in the room. Obviously you have practice squad guys and the rotational guys, but I think it's a good thing with a very young and inexperienced room to have continuity in the position coach realm. And the other thing is that Mike Elston and Steve Klingscale are staying. That's huge. This is fantastic because there's so much experience in the building around the young defensive coordinator. I feel so much more confident about this defense and so much more optimistic than I did, at the end of the season when I was like, yeah, we know Minter is leaving. I don't know what's next. And there are still multiple defensive coordinators in the building. I'm kind of astounded that Mike Elston didn't get opportunities elsewhere. Same with Steve Klingscale. It surprises me that Jesse Minter didn't take them with him. It's possible that they also just didn't want to go, and that was something that they knew. And, the Chargers are likely to add an edge rusher or defensive tackle in the draft. Keeping Elston is awesome for that. That's not a position you want to mess around with. Plus, I'm sure Joe Ortiz probably values that expertise in terms of evaluating players and seeing how they fit, both in terms of free agents and potential draft picks. So they already have the scheme familiarity, right? Klingscale and Elston, they already know what O'Leary wants to do because he wants to do what Minter wanted to do. And so if the Chargers were to add someone in the secondary, we've seen them do that a couple times, it would be a really good thing to have Klingscale with them. I think that we have a lot of reasons to be optimistic. I'm glad that there's a new voice in the linebackers room. Like I said, I want Deion Henley to get back on track. I want Marlowe Wax to develop. I think we've seen some pretty good things out of him, and maybe they draft someone on day 3 in that room. That's something I would like to see. I think they need more bodies for special teams. So if they can get kind of a Troy Dye kind of player where they mostly play special teams, occasionally they can fill in as depth, and then long term you can start to view them as that next linebacker option. And I also think it's worth noting, Junior Colson's still on this roster. Junior Colson is someone that maybe with all these injury issues and stuff, he has struggled, but he's also struggled to see the field, not just get on the field, but when he's out there, the game seems to happen so fast around him that it's just a little bit worrying. And I think a new coach, a new perspective helps that out. That's one of the things I am looking to Chris O'Leary and these new linebackers coaches to address. Like, can we unlock Junior Colson? Because I know we were all so excited when they drafted him. It seemed like really good value, and I think there's a lot of reasons for optimism. This is going to be a really intense building. There's going to be so much energy, and there's been so much energy on the defensive side, right? With Derwin leading the way and Khalil Mack setting the tone, and you have Deion and all these like young, energetic guys. But I think about the offensive side. I want some of that energy on that side too, and I think that's something Mike McDaniel is going to unlock in these players. I think he's really good at bringing out personalities, and that's what I want to see. Because Justin Herbert isn't very loud or outspoken. Same with Rashawn Slater. Same with Joe Alt. So I want to see these coaches kind of pick up on that role, and that's something I'm really excited about. Now, there is some other news in the Chargers world. The Chargers are now projected to get compensatory pick number 214. That is a 6th-round pick, which brings their total picks in this draft to 6. I know that doesn't sound like a very big deal, but considering how successful this team has been with day 3 guys, I am very excited about that. Even if it is just something that you use to trade up, even if it is just something you use as part of a pick swap, trading back, like whatever it is, it's a little bit more draft capital for Joe Ortiz to work with. And, I still think they probably are going to want to trade back once or twice in this draft in the 1st or 2nd round. this doesn't sway my opinion on that by any means. I think they need as many top 100 picks as they can possibly get, but every bit of draft capital definitely helps. So I wanted to mention that. Also, it has come out that, Daniel Jeremiah apparently believes that a lot of teams think that they're going to get Tyler Linderbaum. Like, a lot of different teams believe that they are the highest bidder. And the problem with that is that's going to really drive up the price. And I know it's all eyes on center. That's the most important thing. Anything we can do to help Justin Herbert, that's going to be one of the most important positions. There's a stat going around that Bradley Bozeman and Tyler Linderbaum have a similar pressure rate allowed, both just under 5%. And, to be clear, that's not really a fair stat to evaluate a player with, and Tyler Linderbaum, yes, he had a bad year. So did everyone else on the Ravens offensive line. So did everyone else on the Ravens offense. And, Tyler Linderbaum has a clear upside. Like, he has a clear strength, and that is his run blocking. He is so mobile. He can get to the second level really well. He can effectively be a lead blocker at times on the outside. You cannot expect to draft somebody and get that kind of production. He has been a bit of a liability in the passing game at times, but I don't think he's as bad as that stat makes it seem. So I think it's important that people realize that just because you go and overpay a guy doesn't mean that there's never going to be any issues at center. But at the same time, he has clear strengths, and teams see that. Teams want him. This would be a great time to be Tyler Linderbaum's agent because they are going to make a lot of money wherever they end up. So the other thing is Daniel Popper just put out a mock draft. Thought it was interesting. He has the Chargers taking Akeem Messidor, the edge rusher out of Miami. He is 25 years old, which is the biggest thing that I have against him. I'm curious what you guys think of that. Mock drafts don't generally involve trades until we get a little bit closer and people get a better sense of what teams want to do after free agency. But, I look at Akeem Messidor and I think, well, I want someone who's kind of the edge rusher of the future. I want someone who can pair with Thule for long term. But, at the same time, you are kind of entering the Super Bowl window, and he can be a relatively cheap, pro-ready addition to that. And, if you kind of look at him like you would look at a free agent, you'd go, well, this is really good value. We're not going to have to pay him a whole lot, and, he should be able to produce right away. I don't have a first round grade on Akeem Messidor. I put him at the beginning of the second round, but I'm curious how you guys think of that. I definitely think Messidor needs to go to a team that is, in their Super Bowl window now. So in some ways that makes sense. So let me know what you think of all this Chargers news. Let me know what your favorite coaching hires are and what doubts you have. And I will be back soon. Shout out to my channel members. They are getting some exclusive content soon, as well as early access to a draft video this week. They will be getting the video on the best linebackers in this class. Part 1 will come out this week. So thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you've liked what you've seen, and I will see you guys next time.